Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Network Jersey, the interview with Kevin Keane. My name is Andy Joseph, I'm part of the Network Jersey group, and I'd just like to welcome Kevin and thank him for taking the bit between his teeth and joining the fray here. There was a terrific buzz in the room tonight. It's the best so far, so we just want to keep improving. And if you want to pick up a card or to pass the word on, we have a range of events, a range of evenings like this throughout the year, and we're also taking tables at other events where we group up. So we meet. The idea is to meet different people, different groups of people. So we're not just networking with the same people, we're trying to meet different people. And we'll be putting those events out over our website, which there's a current website. The new website should be out, well, it'll be definitely after Easter, but hopefully it'll be up next week. I'd just like to say a quick thanks to our team, because they're not mentioned much. We've got Sarah Nibbs at the back, and Shelley Kendrick here, Alex doing the videoing, and of course Harry McScandal's doing all the awesome talk stuff. Just could everyone turn their phones off or on silent, please? Notes and rush through them. If you could just take a second to double check. We've got, Kevin's chosen, our interviewee gets to choose a charity for the evening. And our chosen charity as an organisation is the Variety Club. That's the sort of default. But the interviewee gets to choose a charity, and Kevin's chosen St John's Ambulance. And there's a yellow bucket kicking about and some other shaky connection sins, which will be about later. So if you could give generously, because you never know when you're going to need them, do you? That is to leaves me to introduce Peter Zanino. Airtel have been our corporate sponsor, and without them we wouldn't be here tonight. So I'll leave you enjoy the evening, and Peter.
Thanks, Andy. Good evening, everyone, and great to see so many of you here. We're delighted to sponsor the Network Jersey concept as it goes from strength to strength, because our business is all about connecting people, about connecting you to your friends, your family, your colleagues, and your clients, wherever you are in the world. And we're about to revolutionise the way you connect to people with the introduction of 4G services. We've invested £15 million in our 4G infrastructure and upgrade, and we've chosen the world's premium supplier of 4G infrastructure, Nokia Networks. The hardware that Nokia are installing in Jersey is the most advanced 4G ecosystem they have ever installed across the globe. So we're setting our standards very high. The latest independent reports from the regulator into mobile service providers in the island show Airtel come out top in terms of quality of service that we deliver to our customers. And we're the only Channel Island retailer to receive a national accreditation for customer service. So I'm really pleased that this great networking event can be sponsored by our network. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what Kevin has got to say tonight. Jersey's former political business heavyweight journalist, Harry McRandall, goes head to head with Jersey's political and business enforcer. So I wonder who's going to deliver the knockout blow. Let's find out.
So there is recognition, amazingly, that savings do have to be made in the public sector, 50 to 80 million pounds roughly. And there's definitely necessity, because if you looked at the recent numbers on the state's website, in 1993, the cost of the public sector was £205 million. 10 years later, that was £390 million in 2003. And in 2013, it was £770 million. So that's not inflation. Not in my numbers anyway when I tried to calculate them. That's growth, but we do need services, no doubt about it whatsoever. I will shut up in a minute. But Kevin's previous roles also included what were then what I call basket cases. Jersey Dairy and Jersey Post, at the time he took them over, were just unbelievable. And I recall clearly his time at Jersey Dairy when I was working at the Evening Post, and virtually every day I would be calling Kevin up and to discuss some misfortune or other that had beset the business. In fact, I think I'm right in saying that over the years, and this is something he probably isn't that proud of, but Kevin's been responsible for probably more redundancies than anyone I can think of in my time as a journalist. And as I said, he takes on challenges. So, and anybody who was here the last time, he's treasurer at Durrell as well. So we were talking about the issues regarding fundraising for Durrell, and of course JT, where he's a non-executive director. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to Mr. Kevin Key. That's the background, and I'm going to start by basically asking a question I ask everyone who sits in that chair, to get some background, to get some history of who they are, where they come from. Is at 10 years old, where were you and what were you doing?
I was being brought up on Grasset Park. I'm sort of one of 6 children. I was the oldest, five boys, 1 girl. So obviously come from. My mum and dad wouldn't be offended to say, a working class bunch sort of thing. My family had worked very, very hard, and had a paper round, going to Plattdray Road School, just working up to failing my 11th plus. So pretty ordinary stuff, really.
Yeah, so that's what makes probably more remarkable in some respects, because I only found this out myself last week when we spoke, and got a very similar sort of background as well, because I think there is a perception that you're a boss, and that you sort of always were, certainly in what people will remember, and therefore most of the time it comes from having come from that sort of background. So tell us the story of how you ended up at Larishes, for example.
Yeah, what happened was, as I say, I did terribly at primary school, failed my 11th plus, was a bit of a nervy guy, lacking in confidence. You'll be probably surprised to hear that, but it's true. So I went to St Helier Boys' School, and not a great place, I have to say. Not a great place. They had a big bunch of kids to look after, and I think you felt a bit like you'd already failed when you got there, so it was a matter of probably taking you through. You're talking about the 70s now,
yeah.
It's changed a lot, but you were being taken through, and I can remember the careers master sort of saying, well, in probably the army, or be a plumber or carpenter or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So a sort of slightly swotty kid that had failed the 11th plus didn't particularly fit into a convenient box, and also was probably getting a bit rebellious, so there's signs of rebellion even then, sort of thing. So I then went up and messed my CSEs up as well, just to sort of add insult to injury. And so as I was waiting for the results, there was a job in the paper. My mum and dad had said, well, you can have the first week without paying any board.
Right.
So there's no
I got something similar.
No year out or anything like that in those days. You can have the first week. So there was a job at a firm called Alex Pico, firm of accountants, for what they called an audit clerk. And to be honest, I didn't have a clue what an audid clerk was, but I knew I wouldn't be much of a carpenter or plumber or anything like that. And I certainly didn't want to go in the army, a bit scary, really.
Yeah.
So I applied for this job, and I went along and I saw Rod Amy. Some of you will know Rod Amy, and Rod was just getting to the end of the interview to say, "Been great to meet you, but
go away."
And Rodney Pico, his partner, came into the room, and Rodney sort of said, "Well, why don't we give him a shot and see what happens?" And I think that was like one of those life-changing moments. I guess if Rodney had been turned up at the office 5 minutes later, it wouldn't have happened, and therefore, I probably wouldn't be here there now. So it was just a complete lucky thing, and that, I guess, is the one thing that I have been, is very, very lucky in life.
But did you feel that it was the right thing for you? I mean, did you feel lucky to get a job as an audit clerk in in Alex Pico?
I did, yeah. I felt, and I found it interesting from the get-go sort of thing, because, you're going into different businesses and seeing how they work, and, at those days, Picos were the auditors of just about every big commercial business in the island, Larish, Ann Street, most of the parishes, Ken Tredder, I don't know if anybody can ever remember Ken Tredder, the Overseas Tea Corporation, all sorts of great old businesses that were around, and Picos were the auditors. So we were going to these things and learning about business. I really enjoyed it. Auditing was a lot more fun those days than I gather it is these days.
And I take it you took professional qualifications as you went through, did you?
Because of my rather modest academic qualifications, I couldn't do it at that time, but eventually I started doing a thing called the accounting technician exams, which they would allow you to do, and I passed those, and so by that time, that was just before, that was 1979, I started in 74, 1981 I finished those, I was meant to go on, and I suppose started to do, in those days you got a lot more responsibility, and I left Picos to join a guy called John Barrett, and and basically the firm, you gave you miles too much responsibility really when you reflect on it. And so I then started to get tied up, involved in the business, and doing the next bit of my qualifications went a bit sort of quiet, and I just wasn't getting round to that either, sort of thing. But I started to do my ACCA, and slowly, I've got to say, I suppose I was working with a lot of people who said these exams are so hard, no normal person can really pass them. And I started to rationalise that as thinking, well, if they can't, I'm not going to be able to. So I started in my mind to sort of give up. And so I decided that probably the thing to do would be to leave the accounting profession. Because in those days, a qualified accountant in commerce was a rare thing.
Right, okay.
So I thought, well, I've probably got more chance in commerce, and that's when I went to join Larish.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. So
Yeah.
when was that? What age were you when you made
that
move?
was 30 years ago this year, 1985.
Wow.
So, I'd been on the audit of Larish, so I knew some of the people. It was a fantastic old company. Mr. Richards was the CEO. He was 75, and he was still the CEO.
Yeah.
And corporate governance was a bit different there. He was also the chairman.
Yeah.
And, so, whenever they had an AGM, if they asked him a question he didn't like, he just said, I can't hear you, old boy, I can't hear you. Next question. I joined Larish at a time when it was all changing.
And you must have seen huge change during that period of time that you were there, because retail itself as an industry, when we spoke to Martin at the first one, and he explained how much change there was during that time period.
Yeah, well, I was there sort of 7 years before Martin, and Larish had left the succession far too long, and when Malcolm Lewis took over, Malcolm really inherited a lot of problems, and a business that was sort of had just grown fat a bit on Jersey, and you didn't really need to do anything much. And I worked with Malcolm for that time, and then when Malcolm left, we were in a mess, and we got very, very. It was, I think, one of the luckiest days for the company, and certainly for me personally, was Martin Brailsford had retired to the island. He sort of was already bored, and he said he applied for the finance director's job. And I can remember the then chairman saying, to me, well, what do you think of this guy? Do you think you could work with him? I said, well, he should really be the boss. And Martin turned out and he absolutely transformed it. And he and I got on from the start. We were, and it was just, it changed things for me a lot.
Something of a dynamic duo at that time again, wasn't it?
We just sort of were, we were just both interested in business and in seeing businesses change, and because he is so clever and he is a complete inspiration for so many people. It can drive you. He's not here. So
No, he can drive you insane.
He can drive you completely mad, but he's a complete inspiration. And you know, he was just sort of one of those people that had a big influence on my career. So at that point, I still hadn't completed my qualification, but I just said, "Oh, I've got to do my finals. I'm going to go. I'm going to resign because I've just got to do them. And now I've got 3 kids, and
Well,
yeah, I need to finish this thing." And he said, "Oh well, you can have the time off and we'll pay you, but if you don't pass, we'll fire you."
oh yeah.
And I had this letter, and I thought, well, it's not as if there's not enough pressure, but I had this letter, and I used to get it out. And I said, did he really actually say that?
Yeah. And of course, you passed
And
it.
I passed. Yeah, I passed. And you know, and then from that on, then I sort of.
That must have been a proud moment, though, from a boy from Grasset Park to have a professional qualification in accountancy.
It was, Harry, but it had taken so bloody long that, you know, in a way, all you feel is relief
Yeah.
to finally
It's a bit like the
get
end of one
it.
of these.
Yeah, well, it will be,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. It was just absolute relief to get it done, and I felt, in a way, all the knowledge that I'd gained, and I'd been working nearly 20 years by then, but all the knowledge then was instantly sort of franked, and people could have recognised me for the experience that I had, and they stopped asking me if I was qualified or not.
All right, you got
Yeah,
to one
which
of
is
those. You were
really
such
annoying.
an expert.
Yeah, it's really annoying because you want to tell them, but everybody stops asking you when they know that you are, sort of thing. So from there, and then I happened to we had a profits warning at Larish, so there was a change of finance director, and I happened to be there just at the right time. So I got the job that I really wanted to be, and I was appointed finance director of Larish in 1995. So 20 years ago.
Yeah. And that, so you set about changing the company completely during that period of time, didn't you?
So
That was your first
I was part of
set
Martin's change team, you know, and worked with him over that time to really change that company. And, you know, I was so proud of what we did.
And how many people did you let go during that process?
Well, he was in charge. So, he taught me something very that I think about every day, and I think it's true. I like to think I'm quite a humane person, and therefore I like to treat people properly. And I would find where somebody was not working out or something like that, I would say, well, you know, they're a really good person, and they've got this and they've got that, and you know. And he said to me, you know, I'm sure people have heard him say this, is, you know, you have to be absolutely ruthless. When it comes to a business, you have to be ruthless in the decision, because you're dealing with other people's jobs as well as that particular job. So do not be ruthless about the decision, but when you're dealing with a human being, be as generous as you possibly can be within the... And I thought that was really great advice, and I've always tried to live by that advice. So when it comes to a business, and when it comes to a business that's failing, or when it comes to people who have to leave the business, I think about it a lot, and I try to find alternatives, but at the end of the day, I don't fudge that. What I'm more tempted to fudge is, well, how can you deal with that person to make the transition as painless as possible? And what you find normally is that when you do talk to these people, they know.
Yeah.
It's like a sort of, I know it was a problem.
Yeah. But that's when you've got specific cases. We won't go there quite yet, because I'd like to go to, how did you end up at Jersey Dairy? Because I'd say I do remember it being a complete basket case before Brian went, and you suddenly being in there.
Yeah, what happened was, I'd been at Larish a long time, and then I had I had been constantly nagging the people who were running the various bits of the business, telling them how they should be doing it as finance director. And one day Martin got really fed up and said, well, why don't you run one of the businesses? You're so clever, basically. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it wasn't quite like that, but it was basically, there was a vacancy to run the supermarket business. It seemed a bit of a mad. I said, yeah, I've really got to take that challenge. So I ran their supermarket business for a couple of years. And in my mind, I sort of thought, well, maybe one day I might run the group. And, it was the company was over 100 years old by then, and I loved the company. And I thought maybe I might run the group, maybe Martin might become chairman or whatever. That sort of thing might happen. Anyway, the idea came up that they would merge it with Ann Street Brewery when Tom Scott came along, and I was sort of persuaded eventually that it was the right thing for the companies, but at that time I decided it was the wrong thing for me personally. So I sort of, as that happened, I started to make up my mind that actually now's my time to move on. I'm in my 40s by then. I probably in a way maybe been here too long, so I need to move. And the dairy job came up, and I knew a little bit about the dairy, and I knew a little bit about. Everybody knew about it because it was in the paper every single week. So, and at that time, it was going through really tough times, and I sort of took a massive risk, really, when you think about it, because my pay dropped by about 40%.
Not really.
To go to the job. They obviously didn't have the money, and the job was much smaller than I was doing. But I just thought it was time for me to have a go, and so I took this massive pay job, and to a company that was really in trouble.
Yeah.
Really in trouble. I mean, we were sort of right up against the banking limits.
If I remember rightly, you were having trouble paying the wages, or was fear?
It was sort of a bit like that. It really was a bit like that, and I can remember, I'd been there a week or two, and I said, "Oh, let's." There's a bit of the dairy I haven't seen, and they. So I said, let's have another look around at what goes on over down here. And they took me underneath. I don't know if anybody remembers the old Five Oaks dairy site, but underneath was like, because it was on, they had like a storm, and they'd been drilling holes in the floors, enormously, so she remember, they'd been drilling holes in the floor over the years, and of course all the acid that they used for cleaning and all that would go down all these holes. So underneath was like, oh my God. And I thought,
What was in there?
They just had a few bits of spares and all that kind of thing, but it was like the sort of stalactites and stalagmites. It was because the place had run out of money, and they had been cutting back on repairs to try and keep going and keep the money going to the farmers and all that. It was a bloody mess, and I really thought,
what have I done?
Really dropped myself in it now. Maybe I should go and ask Tom if there's any jobs kind of thing.
But you got your head down, because I do remember the sort of energy that you were showing at the time, and it's because your staff were talking to me on a regular basis, shall we say, without your consent, but you really got tore into it, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, the deal was with the board, which is owned by the farmers of the island, and they were pretty desperate, So I was seized by the purpose. It was clearly not the money. I was seized by the purpose about trying to get that business fixed, and the deal I did with them was, I'd give me 100 days. Let me have a look at the business. Let me sort of look around it, and we sort of came up with a sort of 100-day plan, and that unfortunately involved coming out of a key part of the business, the mini pot business.
Okay, yes.
And
I think Brian Lamarcon was the only person who thought the mini pots would work, wouldn't they?
Well, it had been a good idea in its time, Harry, but it had just gone past. And so we ended up losing about 20% of the staff. And that was. I can remember standing in this big shed, just announcing it to all the guys, saying, there are going to be. It was 20 jobs out of 100 and odd, maybe a bit more, But we did start, the thing we started with was we started at the top, and we started to sort of, and I think the guys got that, was that, generally the people on the front line don't let businesses fail.
That's interesting comment, and that's been your experience over the years. It tends to be
pretty much always. Yeah. You can have a bad business model, but again, I still think it's the leaders get paid the most. It's their job to sort it out. So if the business is failing, to me, it's basically always down pretty much to the leader.
Well, that's interesting, because we can step into Jersey Post, because again, you took that on really to do a very similar job to it, didn't you? So was it the same issues there, or was it just practices that were different, or?
No, what happened, so the dairy, we got it to a stage where we'd found this idea of a new site.
Yeah.
And, you know, we managed to, lots of people don't like Dandara. I love Dandara.
Yeah.
Because they absolutely got us out of this, you know, we had this site and we could move the dairy to a new site. And I thought at that point, I'd always gone there from Larish rather than wanting to be in the milk business. So I thought, now's my time to move on. And we had Eamon Fenlon, who's still there, was my finance director, great guy. And I said, well, you know, there's your person who's much more into milk than I am, because his dad was a dairy farm or something like that. Much better than me. I'm going now. And I didn't get fired, and B, I didn't get paid off because I still didn't really have any money, to be honest with you. And we went, and I left, and I sort of thought, well, I'll see what happens. It was literally, I hope something turns up kind of thing. And so I started to do a bit of work, ended up doing some work for Gerald.
Yeah.
And then
That's Voisin's, isn't it?
yeah, Gerald Voisin, who was a good friend, and who was a politician that really helped us out when we were in difficult times at the dairy. So I sort of figured that I owed him one, and so I went to help him out a bit at Voisin's. And I'd been there a couple of years. I was working part time there, and I bumped into a guy that I had worked with at Larish, who was a non-exec. And he said, I said, how's it going at Jersey Post? You know, he was a non-executive director there. He said, we've got a few problems, and you know, and you could tell that because he was on the paper every week.
They kept me in work for a while.
Yeah. So the front page of the paper for anybody who was around in 2011, it was in the paper a lot. And said, you know, the CEO's going, and I don't suppose you'd be interested, would you? I doubt if you will, because you know it is the business. The business is a basket case because letter mail's going down, and it's all terrible, and you know it's just terrible.
So he sold it to you well.
He
then.
really sold it to me well, and I said, oh well, I'd love to. You know, I don't think they could believe it. Cool, yeah, let me have a go at that. I'd love to have a go at that. I don't know anything about letters really, but it's another Jersey business that's really important to the island and everything, and so I rocked up at Jersey Post and started to do the same thing.
Those ideas, I mean, I know you actually had to restructure the whole business because there was too many people doing different things and wrong things, but the key element of that plan that you actually came up with was the focus on customer service, wasn't it? Or a key element of it. And I mean, I was amazed when I found that every staff member went through a customer service training program, and it was certified. It was absolutely incredible.
It was a fantastic 3 years. It really was. But I mean, one of the things I think that the previous management had missed was that the posties were the product, and if you have unhappy staff, then you're going to get terrible customer service. It sounds blindingly obvious now, but it was a blinding insight for Jersey Post, you know, that's how I felt. So, and we basically said, once we took the business back to basics and said, well, we're going to focus on getting the service right for the customers, then we can do the other exciting stuff later, things turned around pretty fast. And, as I say, it was a great thing, and we were trying to sort of develop the whole business, and as you say, one of the things that we did lots and lots of amazing things, was, you know, we put absolutely everybody through customer service training. You know, if you go down there, hopefully they're still there, everybody's certificates in reception. We're just so proud of everybody there. It is one of those iconic Jersey businesses that, you know, I felt very lucky to be involved with.
Yeah, very, very much so. And also, when I assist them, do you feel because of your background, you've been able to relate to the guys on the floor sometimes in a way maybe other managers from other backgrounds don't necessarily have that relativity?
Yeah, well, I've been taught not to believe my own bullshit is really what you're trying to say. And I don't. and I stay humble about these things, because you can always learn from somebody. You can learn, and especially if you're about trying to get the customer service right, the best people to talk to are the people, either the customers themselves or the people who are interacting with the customers every day. And so, you know, and I think if you're prepared to listen, which I think management often thinks they know everything,
Yeah.
so they feel it's not probably, you know, right to listen. If you are prepared to listen to people, they will tell you the situation from their point of view, and you know, usually they've got some really good insights, and that's, you know, so I learn from all sorts of people every day, and I've never changed in that respect, and I don't. To me, it's all about life choices. You see people just as clever on a supermarket checkout or in a warehouse or doing sales. They've just made a life choice to say this is what they want to do, and this is how they want to apply their talents and their intelligence to it. So I don't, just because they're happy to do that job, I don't sort of see that that's demeaning or anything like that. I'm happy to learn from them. If anybody's ever been on a checkout, I only lasted about 5 minutes. We used to have a week back to the floor, and you know, if you sit on one of these checkouts and try and work out what kind of orange that is, or all this kind of, yeah, it's so you know, you can learn. You can always learn, can't you?
No, absolutely. Okay, just moving on. The next challenge, of course, was Visit Jersey, and is that right?
Yeah.
Nothing in between.
That was, yeah. I was gonna. So
You were sort of asked to do that, weren't you?
Yeah, what I got to know a lot of amazing people over the time. One person that I get on very well with is John Henwood, and I've always thought that diversifying the island's economy was a really important thing, and I've thought for a long time that the island had not loved its tourism industry as much as it should. When I saw John take over the Tourism Shadow Board and start to talk about the idea that the island should fall back in love with tourism, I thought that was absolutely the right thing to do, and I was a huge fan of that piece of work. And when I left post, again, didn't have a job, thought, I'll probably have the summer off.
You're good at that one, aren't you?
Yeah.
I remember you saying
Hope
to
something
have the
turns
summer
up.
off.
Yeah.
Because I thought when you pitched up at Visit Jersey, you genuinely had been asked, and
No.
and I found out from you afterward, and you
No,
hadn't.
I hadn't at all. No, but I knew somebody was doing a bit of work on the Visit Jersey thing, and he said, I'm writing a report, and I said, not another report. You know.
Yeah.
Why don't we just get on with it, because we really need
To do something.
to do something. And I said, I'm not doing anything, you know, I've got a bit of time if you want a hand. And I think my timing was good, because John said, let's get, that will be useful. So, you know, I've been, again, working with the guys in the department, with colleagues in EDD and with the Shadow Board, and was, you know, one of the people trying to get it to happen. I wasn't the only one. Lots of people have put a lot of work into trying to make this happen.
And what is the structure going to be as compared to what we've just seen? I mean, we had years, well, forever, as far as I can remember, civil servants running the Jersey Tourism Department. What's different? I mean, who's going to be running what and doing what that make it so different? I'm not sure I do understand
I think
that.
the difference is, you know, it's discrete and therefore accountable. It's not a department of the state. It's we've managed to recruit the most amazing CEO for it, a guy called Keith Beecham. He starts on Monday. I think we get the chance of a new start with the industry, you know, to rebuild the relationships with the industry. We get the chance to work on a new tourism strategy. I mean, the last one, I think, goes back to 2004. And I think our timing is probably good, because I think people are genuinely starting to realise that tourism is important. And you know, we all know that we all love living here, and we all know that when friends come to the island, they love it. We just need to spread the word out, you know, and that's not just about Keith's job or the Visit Jersey team's job. That's about all of us saying this is a fantastic place. And you know, as Lee mentioned at the last interview, it is not just about hotels and restaurants. Tourism touches just about every business in the island, and some more than others. You know, Durrell, as was said, Durrell's been heavily impacted by the loss of tourists.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think it's one of those things where we can have a load more spending in the economy without having to house a load more people.
And the body itself, will it be able to be commercial in a way? So, you know, people are talking about ports raising money, etc. So will it itself be able to undertake initiatives? Because I genuinely don't know the answer to this.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, you know, it has a agreement with the with EDD or the major funders, and you know, it's basically going to agree a business plan with them. I mean, our first job is to get this new strategy agreed. Keith is used to working in partnership. He comes from Visit Britain. He's used to working in partnership with government, but with organisations outside the island who are going to bring us tourists, with hoteliers and restaurateurs and everything else. But I think we can all do our bit to really, you know, I don't know if anybody saw the little infographic that I sort of tediously sent to everybody, but it's £228 million worth of spending coming into our economy. 40 million of that is into retailers, for example. 13 million pounds worth of GST. So and the other thing about the industry is it's running about on half capacity. So if any bean counters in here, you know, you'll know that most of the fixed costs are being absorbed already. They had to be, and anybody who's weak is out because it's been so tough for them. So the guys that are in are serious about being in, and they're good at what they do. So they're running about 50% capacity on average across the year, and in fact in 13 they weren't even filling in August. So the impact on profitability of getting those just a few extra percent would be pretty dramatic.
And the impact on the economy would be pretty dramatic as well, wouldn't it?
And it preserves treasures like Durrell and other things for us all to enjoy, you know, and the air routes and the sea routes and so many other things. So I think it's absolutely crucial that we get behind tourism, and we're lucky. I think the Chief Minister, Deputy Senator Farnham and others, they get that now. I don't think government completely got it for a while. He sort of talked about it being low value. And I read a blog by Senator Ozoff today, so that they removed that from the language. Yeah. I'm so glad, because it's not low value. It's certainly high potential, I think, from where it starts.
Yeah. Okay. Well, moving on.
I thought you'd get there.
We get there eventually. Latest challenge. Explain exactly how it came around, and where you are, and what you can tell us, and we'll talk sort of generally about the, you know, we had some numbers there about the growth in the public sector earlier. So, I mean, that's not sustainable and evidently going forward, because you've just said that, you know, if we're going to invest in things, we haven't got the money coming in at the moment to do so, and that could be one of the biggest hurdles that we face.
So, I mean, if I sort of let you know what I've been asked to do, if we just to deal with it, is I was approached by Senator McLean and to join an advisory group. For people who don't know, I've got a bit of history on public spending, because I had, when I was president of the Chamber of Commerce, we were endlessly going on about it, and sort of back in 2006, you know, nearly 10 years ago now, Senator Walker was Chief Minister then, and, you know, people would be moaning about public spending, and they would say, yeah, well, you know, he'd say, rightly so, come on then, well, what are you going to do? You know, meaning stand for election. And one day I thought, well, right, I'm going to do. So I sort of put my hand up and said, I'll take a look at your public spending for you. I'll take some time off work, and I'll find you, it was 20 million in those days, I'll find it for you and I'll do it for nothing. So I just want proceeds to go to charity. I used to get you a few headlines.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
So I had a bit of history. I've always had an interest in it, because, you know, public spending is tax. You know, that's where the money comes from. So I think Senator McLean knew that I had an interest in it, and said that he wanted somebody local to join an advisory group. and I've been working, as you said earlier, with Sir David Henshaw, who's, you know, a knight of the realm, but actually a real ordinary person who's got huge experience of the public sector and changing the public sector. And I think I was seen as somebody who had an interest in it, had some local knowledge and everything else. So I think there's been a slight overreaction, particularly from Deputy Southern, who was sort of warning old people and sick people about it.
You're going to kick them out their homes and starve them.
Be very afraid, apparently. So I am simply providing some advice and a bit of challenge as the island and government look at a thing that their own advisors, the Fiscal Policy Panel, have said is a structural deficit. I think a significant risk of a structural deficit, i.e., there's more money coming in, more money going out and coming in, and that's likely to be the case for some time. And something's got to change. It's either more tax or less spending, and that's what they've said. I think the other thing that they said, which I think is interesting, and they made it was written in pretty plain English. If anybody, normally these things are boring and you have to try and work out what they're actually saying, but if you read that, it's pretty clear. It says there's never a bad time to make the public sector more efficient, and you should get on with it, and you should get on with working out what you can do about the structural deficit. So that's what the states are looking at now. They've got this range of 50 to 80 million, and they've got to find a way of bridging that gap.
Just rewinding a little bit, you talked about the first time you did this. Now, if I remember rightly, you got blocked left, right and centre, didn't you?
I brought the letter.
Oh, wonderful. I didn't know there was any props coming.
There you go. I suppose poor Senator Walker, it wasn't designed like that, but essentially he was boxed in a bit because I'd made this offer. I'd said I'd do it for free, and I said that to Rob Shipley at the JEP, and Rob phoned him up and said, well, are you going to take up this offer then? Somebody's prepared to do this for nothing. And he had to say yes, but of course immediately they sort of saw it. I think they thought, oh no, we don't really want this. And I don't think there was no real burning bridge to do anything about the spending at that time. And so Bill Ogley who was the then CEO, called me in and said, well, you can do this, but you don't really need to, and blah 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 blah. And here's a big long list of
things you
conditions,
can't do,
things you can't do, and things you can't look at. And then I said, I know I'm from Jersey, but I'm not stupid, and I'm not signing on for that. If I can't have access, then I'm not going to do it. But I'll, just to prove my good faith, what I will do is I'll do something on public information, which I can therefore publish, and you can see what you want to do after that, which is what I did. And I was in between the dairy and working with Gerald. I spent a happy summer wading through annual reports and
the love of an accountant.
We love this stuff. And generated a little 12-pager that I sent to. I can remember I was going on holiday and the send button as the taxi was arriving. And then we got in the taxi and were off on holiday. And I thought, light blue touch paper stand well back, because it did not go down very well.
No, I do recall it. So this time round, I take it you have got access then, have you? It's full and
getting
available.
a lot of help. Yeah.
So what's the process been? I know we can't talk about the outcome, but what has the process been? Well, firstly, actually, this time you've taken a fee. Were you offered? I take it you were offered the fee.
Yeah, I mean, I was offered to be paid for it, and I think like everybody else, I got bills to pay, and I had spent a few months doing it for nothing, and I did a part of the Visit Jersey stuff for nothing actually. So I need, I have to earn a living just like everybody
I mean,
else.
for some lawyers, it's about an hour's work, isn't it? What
Yeah,
you get
well,
in a day.
Yeah, there's been a lot of controversy about the level of the fee, but the fee was basically my Jersey Post salary divided by 230 days. It wasn't much, and I thought, oh, I forgot the social security. But so I don't think they can turn. They don't have to pay me any notice or anything, so they can turn it off and turn it on. And I don't think there's many times when I've had a full chargeable day there, because I feel responsible. I don't want to take money for something where I don't add any value. So yes, this time I'm being paid, and but I hope to help and give value for it.
So let's talk about the process. What have you been doing?
So the process up to now is what the chief officers have been through. They've been tasked by the Treasury Minister of looking at their budgets and been asked to make some proposals. And myself and Sir David have gone through and critiqued those and made some other suggestions about what they might do.
Hang on, let's look at that. When you say other suggestions, what are we coming back with? Is there a real move to try and get the numbers, or are we seeing perhaps things replaced by charges or whatever, like we're seeing in the thing in the paper this evening about?
I don't want to get sacked before I start, really, but
Oh, right,
but I think the thing.
I think in terms of the response, it's
I
worth
think
examining.
Yeah. I mean, I thought about how to deal with these things. I mean, and the best way is to just deal with them as they are. So I'm going to sort of risk losing the job before I started it. Sort of. But I mean, basically, I think we've sort of said to them, you've got to look, which they've not been able to do because ministers and chief officers are, there are sort of, there's quite a lot of silos in the States, and we sort of said, well, this time I think you've got to look across the organisation, and frankly, we've sort of said, you have got to look at your biggest cost,
Which is people.
Not easy, but you have got to look at it.
I have to say, I was half expecting a row of boiler-suited guys in blue suit in the front, where the arms sort of folded at the front.
I mean, you can't, as you said, I think they've been getting on for 800 million, 770 odd million.
That's 2 years out of date as well.
And 350 of that is staff. Now, no business wants to. It comes back to no business wants to ever sort of think about making staff redundant if they can possibly avoid it, but they can't rule it out.
No, absolutely.
And for a long time, the states did rule it out, and that was wrong. And I feel very strongly that the states, to the extent that we as taxpayers are paying for public services, the states cannot and should not have any more people than they need to provide those services. And I think what they have done is they have mixed up two aims in the strategic plan, in my view. One is get people back to work, and two is have an efficient public sector. And they have allowed the public sector workforce to grow and grow.
And grow inefficiently, is that what you're saying?
Well, I think to be fair to the people, there's lots of fantastic people there, but I don't think the states is a particularly good user of people. And so they have got it in their mind that the people that work there might not be able to work anywhere else, which is obviously crap.
Yeah.
So they feel that they're doing them a favour by having them working in the States, and they're not. If they don't need them, they should release them to the productive economy.
And you said about the word public services. I mean, the reality is there are things that are done here by the public sector. They're not done anywhere else. I mean, I think of things like leisure centres, etc., where most of this is private sector, elsewhere, and has changed hugely in the UK, for example. There's very little left in.
Yeah, I mean, there's a thing in The Economist this week saying that they've made some massive changes to the public sector in the UK, but actually people thought the service was better on the whole, and that generally what had been protected wherever they could in the UK was the frontline services that are the ones that we all care about, and so they have done. They've made a lot of change, and they're going to carry on making changes, and we have to do it because at last we have you know, real urgency, and that's what you normally need in change. When I normally have turned up to other organisations, there's been urgency. You know, the cheque's going to bounce, or the, you know, you have to do something. And the state's really, up to now, hasn't had to do it. It's been just a bit easy to turn the tax tap on or whatever. I think we've got to call on the state to do the stuff that people in business have had to do with the minimum of impact on frontline services, and we should challenge them to do that. And you know, that's, I suppose, in a way what Sir David and I are doing, and there's lots of people in the States that are, you know, I have a very high regard for the Chief Minister and his Council Ministers. I think we're very lucky to have them. I don't know why they do it for the money they do it, but I'm very glad they do. And I think they get it, and they are saying to the officers, right.
But can they implement it? I mean, I was sitting the other night at the Any Questions event at Greville Parish Hall, and Mark Lones in the audience here was one of the guys on that panel. And we were left with we were talking about eGov and how effectively that had been stalled to some extent. But can we actually see, can the implementation be done? This is the difficulty. There seems to be blockages in the system.
Well, I think it comes back to that point, you know, it's often to get change you need the urgency, and we have that now. So well, the alternative is we're all going to be paying more tax, and we could all do without that. So, you know, the message that we should be sending is, do not shroud wave, and we're not paying any more tax. You sort yourselves out, and then if we do have to pay some more tax, we'll do it when you guys have done what everybody knows that you can do, including lots of people who work in the public sector. I mean, I've had people come to me and tell me quite amazing things, you know, and being quite brave about it, actually, and say, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but...
Well, certainly I introduced you to one chap.
Yeah.
Has been very helpful.
Passionate people who say they see money being wasted and they're not happy about it either. You know, and so somebody who's in the audience sort of suggested we could perhaps ask the audience to throw in some suggestions, and so, you know, I think I've got an email account called savejerseymoney@gmail.com, so if anybody wants to send me a suggestion, it'll be useful.
Happy to jump in there.
Hang on, so it's not quite finished yet, but the question I really want to ask you is, if the job was available, would you become Chief Executive for the States of Jersey?
Well, it's not available.
No, let's assume it was available. Would you be interested in doing it? That has to be yes, doesn't it?
I don't, well, as I say, it's a sort of not available. I think the thing for John is he's got a difficult position, because at the moment he's the Chief Executive of the Chief Minister's Department.
Yeah.
Not
of the whole governmental process.
So he doesn't have the sort of...
But isn't that indicative of the problems that actually exist in the structure at the moment? The legal structures, the way everything's set up, it's so difficult to get anything done. Is that not what you're identifying?
Well, yeah, and I think we all know it. And I saw a letter from somebody today, you know, saying, I really think you should save some money, and it's really important that you do, but not over here. I think you should do it over there. And I think we're all the same. We've all got a brilliant idea, as long as it doesn't start with us. And I think we are going to, as a community, have to recognise that this is a shared thing, and that we're going to have to try and stop this batting the ball around and saying, yeah, I'd do it if you do it, you know, or I can't do it, but you should. You know,
that's fair.
We have to... this is something for all of us to help the states do. And I know there's a lot of people that want to help them. Obviously, Mark is, you know, with eGov, I mean, that is a natural thing, is that we are not very good with using people in the states, and we could do more.
I was actually going to ask that. Isn't your timing brilliant? Because, I mean, technically, we've never been in a better position to actually replace functions with, you know, replace people functions with technology. And I'm just going to spin that on just a little bit. I won't go on much longer now. But on that basis, there's also the threats to the economy, because that sort of thing going into the finance industry could actually see jobs being lost on the other side. So a long-term model of income tax coming from people working may not be sustainable either. But just start with that first part about your timing.
I suppose, you know, I mean, I'm just a a relatively small, fat cog in the wheel, sort of thing. Yeah, so it's not. It's about a lot more than me. It's about the team, the council of ministers, the chief officers, and all that. But I think if the states were to reduce the number of people that they were having, they would probably be looking at people that are in the middle rather than at the front line, probably. And you know, from what I gather, the state, the economy is crying out for skilled people in administrative roles and everything else. And you know, there's a real pressure on the economy for those kind of jobs. So I think, in a way, it is probably the best time. It's never a good time, and hopefully, if it happens, those people that were affected will be treated properly. Come back to the ruthless in decision, sympathetic in the execution. Do that, but get on with it. I think that's the other thing is the states also do not often appreciate the concept of time value of money.
Yeah, I think we all probably understand that one. Yeah.
So, you know,
So you still got your work cut out to some extent. When do you actually finish this exercise, the first stage of it?
Well, we've done this stage and we're just waiting. I might not be doing any of it after tonight.
Right, okay. Well, there is that risk, I suspect. It may well
but,
be.
you know, we'll see what happens after that.
So what's the timescale now for the report
back?
Well,
they've got to, you know, they've got to work on they've got their strategic plan debate coming up in April. Mm. And they've got to file their medium-term financial plan during June.
Okay.
And they've got to debate it in September. So there's a lot going on. So it'll be the next few months as to
see what the response
is. See what happens. But I think we should all push back on user pays charges, disguised user pays charges, and
so fight them and up against them.
And say, do the savings first. Do the proper public sector cost efficiencies first before you come to us in any way for more money.
Okay, brilliant. I'm now going to open it up to question.
I'm not close enough to the numbers, and you might be closer to the numbers than I am, but I have a suspicion that whenever technology is in the frame, that it's going to be at a cost. And so my concern at this stage is whether there's going to be a real benefit and a payback to the taxpayer given the investment in eGov as an initiative. So that's one of my concerns. You quite rightly say that most of us in this room probably are taxpayers. And do we really want to pay any more tax? Probably not. But do we want a first-rate service for Jersey and for Jersey taxpayers and the public? Or do we want a third-rate service? So we might want to consider that. You said that the chief officers you've gone to are making some proposals. My guess is that they are at a very high level. And are they really going back to the floor to understand the impact of the reduction in heads? So all of those, many questions, I'm sorry, but I feel very passionate about some of these issues that you've raised this evening.
So deliverability of eGov.
Yes.
eGov, I mean, if it's done properly, will save money because there'll be less costs. You know, people are their biggest cost. So, and it should provide a more efficient service to the customer.
But are we ready? The reason why I ask this, Kevin, is that I'm working in the States Department right now that I'm not willing to name, that has used the e-form as very much as a trial. And in our experience, the take-up has been less than 5%, and it's been more problem than actually its benefit.
Well,
I'm happy to take that offline and speak to you privately this evening because it's been a shocker.
Right. Cool. What was the impact on? We have to protect the front lines clearly, and I think that I think any organisation, and most organisations I've seen have been through 10% cuts, 15% cuts, and they've managed to often make their front line work better. So I don't think that's an issue. As to paying more tax, I would pay more tax, actually, but I am not going to pay tax, or I'm not going to pay tax willingly whilst the states are not doing their bit. And I think if you asked everybody out here, everybody can see that they can do more, and you probably, because you work there, could probably see that they could do a lot more.
I think think my concern is that a large amount of money is being spent perhaps too far in advance. I think e-forms, in terms of technology going forward into the future, is absolutely something to invest in, but I just don't think that we're ready for it right now.
Okay. Okay, we'll leave it there. Next question. Thank you very much. Yeah, Tim? Tim at the front.
Hello?
Yeah, you're there. Yeah, don't worry.
Kevin, we've talked a lot about what's needed to be fixed in the island. What do you think the island does really well and we can build on for the future?
Oh, thanks, Tim. Well, I think my view is it's a fantastic community, isn't it? And it's because it's small, and because we tend to know each other, and because you can get from one place to the other quickly. The community comes together when there are problems, and if you've only got to look at the charitable sector, if you want a really good example of all the work that's done voluntarily. St John's Ambulance is one that I'm involved in, but there's loads of others, and I don't think you get that in many other places. I mean, the island is fantastic.
John, I saw John Boothman at this corner over there. Can someone take the mic to him? We'll come to you, Scott, in a minute. Hi, John.
Thanks. Kevin, I think any of us who've had to go through the process of taking significant cost out of an organisation know how very hard it is at the execution point. And nothing really can be achieved without the wholehearted support and commitment of a board of directors who stands behind the executives as they achieve this. And the corollary within the states, I guess, is the Council of Ministers. Well-meaning is a good start, but is there really the commitment when it comes to job losses to actually follow through? Because it seems to me nothing will be achieved without a really determined level of support of that from the political leaders.
Can I just quickly come in on that? And timing as well must be everything here, because the political leaders face an election in 3 years' time. Therefore, if nothing happens in the first year now ahead, the likelihood of anything happening meaningful at all before they come to the election surely is a lot lower.
Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic about the Council of Ministers. I think that they're taking the advice of the Fiscal Policy Panel. I think Ian Gorst is turning out to be a real leader, I've seen him in action on a couple of things where he's got the strength to sort of see things through. And I think the issue is big enough that, we do have that burning bridge this time. And they've boxed themselves in neatly by saying no more tax increases, although it's a sort of car parking attempt yesterday sort of thing. So, it's holding the line. But I'm the proof of the pudding and all that. But I think, I do feel this time might be different.
Okay, Scott. Talking about politicians, here's one now.
I was just wondering what your views are on when we're making budget cuts, the salami slice approach that's been going on in the States.
I think that's the sort of nature of where, it's done by department, and in a way, I think, for a long time the states had a rule where they would not make any redundancies. They would, they had an agreement, and they therefore were pushed into this position where they would, be trying to make cuts on a small part of the budget, and therefore, you'd see them doing some mad things like, cutting back on maintenance or whatever. I think this time I'm hoping that, we sort of said to them, you should look at it a different way. You should look at it down the organisation, take the P&L, find your biggest cost, it's not difficult, and say, how could we be more productive with people? Because, you've got all these sort of departments all over the place, some with people that could really help another department that's probably short. And although it acts as a corporation, it actually looks like a corporation, it actually isn't. It's lots of sort of silos and a bit like some empires maybe, Scott.
Yeah. Anybody else? Nick Meldrum, you had one, didn't you? It was what, Nick's down there that he sent to me beforehand, so I'll give him a chance to answer it. To ask it, rather.
Evening, Kevin. I don't know whether the time is right, but what are your views with regard to the amount of slack there is within the States with regard to jobs? Is it the time not right, once that slack has been identified, to possibly look at the 0-10 policy? And is this a flawed policy, and are we ever going to have a long-term policy that is cutting jobs to fill this bucket?
I think he's looking at the income side there. That 0-10 means that there's no corporate tax coming in. Therefore, the structural deficit might actually be because we don't have a corporate tax structure.
Well, I suppose that's the whole tax bit, the income side needs to be looked at, and I suppose what we'd all like to see is see the income side growing without all of us paying more tax, and that's by the economy growing. But I don't think, if there is efficiencies to come out of the public sector, they should come out. Because we can always find other things to spend taxpayers' money on. And if we can't, we can give it back to taxpayers, as a company would do if it had capital that it didn't need. So I just think if there are efficiencies, I get the impression that there are a lot, and people who work in the public sector have told me there are a lot. Then we do those first. 0-10 may need to be looked at. It's not my field at all, but it, you know, I don't know. One of the things we mustn't do is let our finance industry, let what happened to our tourism industry happen to our finance industry, because there's like 12,000 jobs out there that depend on it, and probably a lot of others as well.
Okay. Andy, do you want to have the final question then?
Only if there's no other questions.
I think we just do it there.
We've got one more.
So, picking up on the overspend, I'm just concerned that the overspend is going to be taken from the wrong areas, and that we need to make sure that we maintain the frontline staff. As you quite rightly said, how many back to the floor initiatives are actually taking place? How many of our senior management teams and chief officers are going back to the floor, just as you did, Kevin, on that cashier till, to really fully understand where the money needs to be spent?
Well, that I think is what the leadership of the organisation needs to do, and I think it's got to engage its staff and say, here's our problem, you know, it's a shared one, here's our problem, what do you think we should do? And I do really think that we'd probably be surprised, pleasantly surprised, with what the staff will come up with. And I've actually said that to John Richardson myself. You know, it's an essential thing that we do.
My worry is the staff don't have enough of a voice. The frontline staff, the operational frontline staff, don't have enough of a voice.
Well, they should have.
Okay, thank you.
I should take that
Thank
back.
you.
Okay, Andy, do you want to finish us off then for a final question?
Yeah, it's a bit of a lightweight question, actually. It was genuinely lightweight, so we finished on a happy note. Some of you may or may not be aware that Kevin's quite very interested in motorcycles. I just wanted to ask you what your current favourite bikes you've got in the garage, and why do you love motorcycling? And what's your favourite bike?
I've just always been a bit of a petrol head, and always been mad about bikes. And you know, as you get older, you'll know this one day, Andy, you start to sort of go back to, you can afford the stuff that you just wanted to have when you were a teenager. So, you know, although they're now miles more expensive than they were. So I've got, I suppose my favourite is my Honda CBX, which is a 1979 completely outrageous 6-cylinder bike, which is just stupid basically. But, you know, my wife finds me like looking through the mags, sort of thinking, well, what's going to turn up next? They're not so fast as they, you know. So if you get on a modern bike now and you're an old person, you're going to die. Whereas these things are, you know, a little bit more. You know.
So it's just the exciting bit of the accountant, as it gets on a bike, to the antithesis of it all.
Yeah, I'm not totally boring. I know.
I've got visions of Kevin sort of on his scooter bike now and motorbike. And also one important thing to take away with you from this is please tell your grannies and sick people not to be afraid of Kevin Keane. Some collection boxes for St John's Ambulance, a very, very worthy cause, so hopefully you can all dig deep into your pockets. And the bar at the back is open. I think Kevin is buying the drinks for everybody. So please all enjoy and have a drink, and thank you very much for coming.